Where do I buy some of those Kimball logs?
I mean, we can give you a special gift box.
Would you comment on that structure is really overwhelming, it's big, it's massive. The perception might be that it's maybe too big or too massive. Would you comment on maybe those comments that might be taken?
Yes. I mean, I think maybe if I start, I think we looked at a lot of different options, and we actually, in my opinion, in our opinion, if we would spread out the volume, seen from the pedestrian point of view, it'll be actually, in a way, a bulkier building. I mean, maybe when you look at the model, it might be a little bit lower, but it's still going to be some 40 or 50 feet, but it's just going to be a lot wider. So I think actually by turning it into an unusually slim building type, we actually don't block as much of the sort of horizontal panorama of the city, although we do go somewhat higher. I also think that the fact that Park City is a city on a slope actually means that the variations in elevation quickly get sort of consumed by the natural ascent of the topography itself. And I think sort of, I would really invite everybody afterwards to study the site model that we brought. I think as you change your vantage point, especially if you stand higher up, suddenly the Kimball really sort of sinks into to the surrounding urban tissue. And then I think finally for us, a major sort of breakthrough was when we discovered the coalition. Is that I think the only reason that the coalition building isn't today like the most significant element of the sort of the cultural skyline of Park City is simply because it burned and nobody rebuilt it. And I think rather than recreating the coalition as some kind of a pastiche, I think there is some kind of interesting approach to preservation is that you essentially recreate its silhouette, but for a new purpose, and not with a sort of a pastiche architectural recreation, but with something that in a way utilizes the same ingredients that created Park City historically, but using it in a contemporary way that looks forward. So in that sense, it is really our, I mean, we studied a lot of different proportions once we had decided to stay on the new footprint. And I think also we chose to retain very generous ceiling heights in the three main spaces, the two art galleries and the restaurant, because this is a public building and it is a space for art, and it's a space where essentially the reason that artists prefer to exhibit in repurposed industrial buildings is often because of the generosity that industrial buildings have. They have the long spans and the tall ceiling heights, and I think we can try to recreate that. We looked at having shorter silhouettes, but in a way the magic of hitting the 80-foot mark really resurrecting the ghost of the coalition building felt like the right thing in this case.
Maurice?
Thank you for really taking us through the thought process and the evolution of the design. Really appreciate that, and the history lessons. I think there's always a job on Main Street for a tour guide for Park City's history. So, can you talk some more about the entrance and going into the new space, how that interacts with, sort of at the human level, at least from the model and from the visuals? It seems very compressed, and so I would have a concern about wayfinding and how folks can, what draws people to find the entrance to that space.
Maybe we should look at the plan. So essentially we arrive into this space. Remind me of the depth in feet here, euro.
It's 85 feet per 80 feet.
80 feet width and the depth of the space?
It's 60 by 80.
Well, I'm not thinking about the dimension here.
That would be about 15.
So essentially, you arrive into the space where you have the open view into the gallery. You have an incredible, like you can basically practically see all the way up to the top of the building. You already sense the spaciousness of the restaurant above you. From here you have the ticketing. You have the shop that faces out towards the street. And then you have the big space here that connects the two levels of the learning center.
And can you talk about its relationship to the sidewalk and to the outside environment?
Yeah, it's essentially like, maybe just it could be interesting to make a comparison. I think it's quite, the depth it has is quite similar to the current entrance, except it's like 3 times wider and, I don't know, 5 times taller. So
Okay,
you really come in like an unusually generous entrance space. The relationship to the street is that from floor to ceiling, all along Eva, you have essentially an open window, so that as you move along the street, you'll be able to see into the lobby. You'll actually be able to see across into the education center. You'll even be able to see if somebody is sitting and having lunch close to the edge of the restaurant. And you'll be able to see if this exhibition doesn't require no daylight, you'll be able to see the exhibition inside, or it could be turned into a big artwork or a big poster if it's blinded off. So in that sense, as you walk along, you essentially have, because of the incredible generosity of the open space in the middle, you have essentially all aspects of the art center somewhat available to you.
So maybe I just might add that the real idea of the wayfinding is as you come into this space off of the street, you're able to see almost everywhere you want to, you may want to go. So you're able to see with that large volume of that circulation space into all of those spaces and know where you might want to go from there.
And part of my question probably will follow from that one as well. But firstly, York and your team, thank you for an incredibly spirited presentation. And I think if students ever needed to understand the importance or the weight of history and how it can root what you project into the future, I think your presentation certainly did that. And I think it feels as if it is of this place because you are making very explicit reference, even though, of course, it doesn't look like the Coalition Building, which is, again, really a strength of the scheme. But it does have some of the same challenges of the Coalition Building. It's a big figural object that's meant primarily to be looked at from the outside. And I guess the question that I had has to do with what was your thoughts about the public realm, that which is genuinely to the public, whether you're coming to visit the Kimball or not. So it belongs, it's about the building, the street, the sidewalk. I think on the side where you have the stair going up, you've kind of generously glazed it so you can look right into the building. But then on the other side of the building, it's absolutely a solid wall. And so I'm still trying to understand what's the experience of the public realm if you never were to go into the building, and if that was perhaps not your particular concern.
I mean, I think one thing is that I think one of the charms and what is really successful, I think, apart from the raw industrial charm of Park City, I think that it is actually the intimacy of the public realm. The fact that it isn't wide streets, it isn't like big plazas. There is actually an abundance of like little nooks and niches where different forms of public life can happen. And in that sense, I think we didn't feel that the need for Park City was like another big plaza. What we thought could be interesting is to create outdoor spaces where the exhibition of like the artwork or the cultural activities of the Kimball can spill out on the two roofs. Where obviously the lower roof is much more immediately available. we imagine that the big general space in the middle that extends, at least in terms of space, both upwards and downwards, could be a real, truly public space for people that don't even have necessarily an interest in art, but they might be provoked or lured into pursuing art. But then I think lastly we looked at I mean, in my mind, a building like this stack of this like turning stack of would I think it would have to be made out of some like you would have to be carved out of wood if you didn't want to investigate what goes on inside, because it is really like it begs exploration. And then I think what we work with is that from all sides you have like carefully crafted openings. So basically, from of course, like facing towards the Hiba, it's the big upper gallery that draws your attention. Like rather than having like 100 things happening at once, there's these focused moments. Apart from the sort of the inviting sculpture nature of the wood stack itself, you have the view into the upper galleries. From these two sides, you have the windows of the administration, where you'll be able to see people passing by, also visitors of the museum. The circulation of the museum actually passes by these windows. Towards this side, you have the big porch that opens up and spills out on the roof. And finally, on the lower level, you have the big opening that might look small in the scale of the model. Essentially, all of the openings might look small in the scale of the model, but essentially, this is like 10 foot tall, or even taller horizontal glass openings that really follow the entire width of the street. So I think that there's going to be plenty of invitations and openings that would lure people to step inside. But I also think that since this is a public building for art, that it has, in a way, that it's treated with a different amount of detail. Like it has, on one way, it's like it has the refinement of the carpentry of the interlocking wood logs. It has the simplicity of the sort of modulus window openings. It has the incredibly rich texture of the trestle wood, but it doesn't have like all of the windows and door frames and rain drain pipes of a normal building. So in that sense, if you've seen the trestle wood in real life, it's like the texture and even the colors, it sort of almost like explodes into
many of you may be familiar with the Soldier Hollow building. That was also built by trestle wood that's here. But it almost gets these purple tones into the wood because it's been marinated in that salt water for over 100 years.
Dina.
The historic building, the historic Kimball Art Center. I really love how you've kept the trestles, and there's been a lot of controversy about the stability of this building and about building on top of the building and about what you can keep and what you can't. Can you talk a little bit more about how you approach the historic building? And I love also that you've separated it, the new building from the old building, and respected the old building. But can you go into a little more detail about how you approach the historic building?
Yeah, so you can see here that it's really about preservation of that building in this historical district and trying to keep the historical presence of that building, which really also has to do with part of the whole solution of stacking all of the new on the existing site. So because there's a massing and a height and a feel that building brings to the city that has been there for years. And so we wanted to respect that and keep that. But at the same time, we wanted to utilize it to expand the gathering spaces. So to open up that gathering space down below, to use this structure that creates this porch up above. So we're trying to utilize the existing form of that building for new uses while maintaining the historic preservation, really, of the building.
you can say it's almost been an act of just because with the reuse and the repurposing, and it has turned maybe a little bit more labyrinthian than it was originally designed as. And we've tried to sort of revert to some of the sort of functional, rational order that the garage contains in the way that we've laid out the plans. And also from the outside, we've sort of cleaned it up a little bit, but preserving the same materials and the same rhythm of openings. So in that sense, it's almost like it's not really a refurbishment, but more like a recreation of a former, more sort of a pure state.
There's so much about the design that is so special and has such a wow factor that really appeals to me. I guess one of the questions I do have is, maybe it's an amygdala hijack, but one of the things I've really wanted is visibility on Main Street, because it has felt like a lost opportunity with the crowds that go up and down Main Street and aren't finding our front door, and yet there are no windows along the Main Street side. I obviously see the spectacular moments that are happening up higher. How would you feel if we felt particularly strong about having bank windows on the Main Street side so it is more inviting? Do you feel that it detracts from the design?
We looked actually I mean, of course, like, one of the things about the architecture, especially in architectural competitions, is that it happens in this sort of artificial void of having absolutely no dialogue with anybody who's actually eventually going to be using having this building. So, of course, we've made some different judgment calls. Some of the things we studied is that, like at some point, we actually look at having, we like the nature that you never have two windows banging together on both sides. So it's always an opening in one side or the other. And one of the things we looked at was actually as a way of revealing the slope that you could actually, as you turn the corner on Main Street, that you could have a wedged opening that would look into the lower level, and you would sort of follow the ramp of people walking down. So I think that would be an interesting possibility to pursue. And also one thing that we did study, but that I'm not sure that we would recommend in the end, was actually looking at even almost like in a brick pattern where you pull the bricks apart. We looked at having segments of trestle wood that we pulled apart, so you would actually have, because these logs are what is like 2 feet, no, almost 18 inches tall. So even with that, you would get 18 inches. I work in centimeters. 18 inches. A decent window just for peeking in. But I think I would rather go for the idea that you would have a wedge-shaped window all along Main Street, so that as you are at the bottom of the building, you really look straight into to the gallery. And as you stand maybe on the other side of the street, you'll see the legs of people appear in front of the doors. So that, I think that could really work with the logic of the architecture.
I think I appreciate that that's a real concern of ours, the exposure to me and solving that appropriately. What I wanted to compliment you on, and I find it rather refreshing, and the fact that I think to use the term that you used, York, the tectonic quality of it. I mean, that's exactly what you see is exactly what you get. It's rather refreshing. There doesn't seem to be a lot of pretense in this, pretending to be something that it isn't. But what I'd like to ask you about is, you know, a small little art center. Every wall surface is really precious and ought to be an opportunity to display art. And that art viewing experience should be, I would think, rather cohesive. So there's a bit of a challenge, and I'd like to understand why the two galleries are separated by a restaurant and administrative space vertically. So you have more of a time-space disjunction between those two in terms of experience. And then, in your mind, would that sloping warped surface be conducive to display of art?
Yeah, like basically what the thinking was to have two really distinct galleries that can actually, because they're both quite large galleries compared to what we have now, to have two really distinct galleries that can have radically different qualities and that can have radically different art installations that can also be open and closed at different times, so that breaking down one exhibition and opening up a new show wouldn't like ruin a visit to the rest of the museum. In that sense, they're both attached to the core of the elevator. And then we thought exactly that this idea of almost like having a pause as you move from one exhibition to the other. You can also take the elevator straight and then pop into the next exhibition. But we thought that those two spaces have all of the freedom and flexibility of a white cube gallery. Raw floors, white walls, daylight or no daylight. Whereas the in-between space, because it is so generous, we thought could be actually quite well suited for the display of certain artworks. It won't have the same degree of climate control and light control as the rest of the galleries. But this in-between space, you could easily suspend certain sculptures or mobiles. Even on the core in the middle, you could display artwork. So I think you could have a more, like part of the permanent collection could essentially occupy the in-between space, and the two galleries could be for changing things. So in that sense, even though the middle, the in-between space is much more specific and much more diverse.
And you talked about this being kind of a closed building. Often museums, in their true sense, aren't closed for the art, but we have this separate structure on the inside that is completely separate with the mechanical systems and with the opportunity to create more wall space aside from the circulation space for art and make it a very flexible space.
I too wish to compliment you on the depth of research that you've obviously put into the presentation and the thought process to develop this concept. I appreciate the materials and that they are from the Great Salt Lake. I think that the use of a native, refound, reclaimed material is especially profound. To build the structure the way you have presented it here, can you just venture a budgetary guess?
Do you want to? We did actually work with Big D to look at both technical issues and budget issues.
Yeah, and so we looked at specific costs of different systems and have found unique ways to break out the costs so that we understand them uniquely to the different things. The cost estimate did come in above the $6 million, as you might anticipate. But it may be closer to $9 million potentially, but we haven't done enough investigation. There's a lot of investigation still to be done. That ground source heat system is an upfront cost, but there's a question of it becomes much more efficient if there's an aquifer, which is very common in this area, underneath the building, and the soils and then the actual sizing of the structural members on the inside. But from a general guess, and that's with a large contingency, so that we can really understand what these different systems are and have the ability that as we, as you said, as we get the opportunity to work with you, we can actually start to cool down. And we've already done that analysis so that we understand, so we can start to have those conversations right away.
I mean, I think also, I just want to repeat the point, is that I think everything we've done, we've actually done it to focus the investment as much as possible. And I think by trying to do as little as possible to the existing Kimber Garage, we have, by focusing the entire new building on its own plot of land, having a minimal interface between the two, I think we have really maximized the opportunity to get the most value for money possible. Bruce?
Yeah, there's been a really interesting theme and discussion going on all day and throughout various presentations about what it means to build in our time, and at the same time, what does it mean to build a timeless building that 100 years from now, they won't necessarily pinpoint it to the day when architects figured out how to twist buildings. So I guess I'm kind of interested in how you situate this building in a timeless conception of Kimball Art Center as a 21st century building.
I think, I must say, I think we've actually deliberately stayed away of any sort of typical contemporary architectural obsessions. I don't know, it's like very sort of classic contemporary, like any use of like, I don't know, patterns or ornaments or digital ornaments. I think we try to sort of go back and really rediscover some vernacular intelligence and appropriate it and make it ours. And I think like every time you start a new project, you never really know if you're gonna get there this time. Like you know, like, maybe we don't. Maybe it doesn't. You know, the muse stays away and we just sit there and fool around. But I really think, in my own humble opinion, in this case, we really discovered something that we hadn't expected. And again, in my own humble, I think we really nailed it, and we're like dying.
Can I ask one more question about Main Street? We had a lot of conversation about Main Street and the importance of openings on Main Street. You touched on that in one of the questions, but not satisfactory to me. Could you open that up, such as your entrance on Heber Avenue, all the way, or at least make a large opening there so you can walk in from that side without harming your structure?
I mean, I think I do think somehow playing with the two levels across the corner should make it possible to. At some point, we actually had, because part of we edited that out, but part of the tectonics of the log, the overlapping corners of the log cabins is that if you want to insert something, you can sort of we had a 45-degree turned entrance that was like poking in on the actual corner itself. I mean, we'd be more than willing to. I mean, I'm sure that within the sort of the tectonics established, we can find interesting ways of addressing both streets. I think personally, I think there's a great potential in looking at the topography, and that it would essentially be two openings on two different levels, sort of merged with the internal ramp. But I mean, we'd be more than happy, as I say, that essentially the way we design is really this idea of trying to sort of map out what are the key criteria, what are the biggest potentials, what are the greatest problems in a certain situation, and then try to use that analysis to inform our design decisions. And of course, when we're working in a vacuum without any relationship with the Kimball itself in the competition phase, we're going to have to make a lot of guesses or just autonomous decisions without any information from the client side. And I think with all projects, once you get to the next step, there'll be an avalanche of refinements. But I think we have such a generous and accommodating a big idea, if you like, that within it, I think there's a lot of space for refinement and adjustments to incorporate additional input.
Well, I will take responsibility for the void that you feel between you and the client. But thank you very much. I mean, we are at the end of that time, but I would like to give you a minute or two just for a wrap up. Any final comments you would like to make?
I almost think we blew our load, actually. I mean, I'm not a native English speaker, so I think like I said, we have we really like when we came here for the first meeting, we walked around, we got to know the institution. We had this totally staged moment where we came into the gallery, and there was like a little kid getting a tour with a group, and then the kid, like as we walked by, like Robin was taking us around the gallery, he said, "This artwork makes me feel magical." That was like, that doesn't happen in real life. But so we left here with having had a great time essentially, and we got the idea of coming back to have our ski holidays here and get a little bit of Sundance, some combination of work and pleasure, and I think we. In our opinion, we developed a great working relationship. We really think that we discovered something that we haven't done or worked with before, and then that I think would be an amazing adventure to carry out. So we're like dying to do this, and we'll be really excited and committed to making this happen if you would go with this idea.